EA is a gaming empire that was once great, but today they're living in a volatile bubble that could very well soon burst. Throughout 2017 and prior years, hostility aimed at EA has pretty much threatened to ruin the reputation of a company that many of us held close to our hearts many years ago. EA has funded many amazing games, from Dead Space to Battlefield 1942 to The Sims, KOTOR, and Burnout Paradise, one of my personal favorites. They've made possible the creation of Mass Effect and Shepard and fantastic games like Dragon Age Origins, Crysis, and Mirror's Edge. I grew up with EA games, and without them, many of my favorite games and new IPs wouldn't have gotten off the ground. They have the potential and the talent to make some of the best video games on the market today, just period. But things have changed. They're not the standard for greatness in gaming anymore. Like a monster, they become twisted and deformed and ugly, but they sure know how to do business. If you invested in EA 5 or 7 years ago, then you made a pretty good return on your money. Over the course of the last decade or so, EA has had just a fantastic run, riding the wave of sports gaming and yearly AAA game releases. But has that trend run dried today? That's the question we gotta ask ourselves. Following the release of Battlefront 2, actually even before that in the beta, EA's market cap was slashed pretty bad. EA lost over $3 billion as investors basically ran for the fucking hills, culminating in an 8.5% drop to their share price. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 was up 2% during this time, so in reality, EA's stock price essentially crashed over 10%. The commotion was of course caused by the vindictive micro-gambling systems pushed into the belly of Star Wars Battlefront 2. Not only that, but EA's self-righteous excuses and defenses that they published made the situation even worse. It was a company that just made a bad move, and then they tried to play it off like it was all fine and dandy. And man, they've just done that too many times. EA is a company that today misunderstands the scope of its brand and the loyalty of their fanbase. They underperform in executing the fundamentals of good video game making and overperform in their reach to make games financially independent. They act like they could not be touched, and they treat their games that way. They mistakenly believe that anything Star Wars, regardless of its quality, will sell better than other products. The launch of Star Wars Battlefront 2 proved this to be a very costly assumption, as quite the opposite actually happened. Battlefront 2 underperformed heavily with a reported 880,000 sales during its open month. That's 20% of what COD World War II sold. EA's other flagship titles, including Mass Effect and Need for Speed, also came up short. Andromeda's sales numbers were okay, but relative to its $100 million budget, total revenue wasn't nearly as high as EA anticipated. Later in the year, Need for Speed Payback would also sell poorly, about 500,000 sales or less within the first month, in addition to very harsh criticism from the gaming community. Payback was one of the worst Need for Speed games to date, in a time where racing games can be lifted to an absolutely invigorating and engrossing place, a place where speed cards don't need to exist. But today, things have calmed down for EA and they've stabilized in the greater market. It's no doubt that EA's dominating position with Madden, FIFA, and the sports gaming market has allowed them a very plush financial cushion to where they can sit and lean on during bad times. EA's monopoly on the sports gaming segment brings in just recurring income, if you think about it, with real no increase in cost. Making a new Madden has no surprise expenses or spikes in the cost of technology. EA has found the sweet spot with all of its sports games, in the sense that they bring in the most bacon while absorbing losses from other failed projects. Slap on a few new features into the same game engine, turn up those shaders, and boom! We got a new Madden game, all for next to no cost. It's absolutely brilliant business. But outside those games, what else does EA really have to fall back on? The last few years has seen its AAA library disappoint time and time again. They've even burned their own games to the ground, case in point Titanfall 2, and their 2018 catalog is looking very thin. On its official website, there are only 5 upcoming video games listed, 1 being a mobile game, and 2 being kind of pseudo-indie games. Outside of UFC, that leaves only Anthem. But Anthem itself has received the back end of the beat stick ever since the controversies of Battlefront 2, UFC, and EA's general stance on micro-gambling and paid progression have been made so public. Many people are just cautious of another flop or a money grab, or hesitant that Anthem just might not live up to the marketing propaganda. To the credit of those people, I don't blame them. EA has shown itself very willing to overmarket their games and make them seem much better than what they really are. So Anthem's fate is rather precarious at the moment. I truly hope it turns out amazing, but with the trends we've seen, the final game may end up flopping or turning into another EA fiasco. EA is officially addicted to the fiasco and the PR nightmare, and persistent in its conversion of honest games into long-term money-making products. To many, EA is infamous for destroying any good thing it touches, especially popular video games and development companies. BioWare, Visceral Games, Maxis, and so forth are but a select few to be squeezed by the throat and choked out, their reputations and games being destroyed by the demands of the mother company EA. They've literally forced developers to make their games crappier and then shut them down when things don't go their way with the numbers. They've also killed the single-player dream of their developers and banished the potential for specialty games, i.e. games that just don't fit their corporate money-making mantra. The fact that these decisions have gone against what we actually want from their games as gamers is only proof of their blatant disregard for their own consumer base. They're out of touch with reality, focusing exclusively instead on building their own idealist empire that is built off nothing but the disdain we share for them and the money in our pockets. But this industry has shown that it's not going to go along with these charades anymore. Not from this company, not from EA, not from any company. Fiercely and overwhelmingly, we have stood up against practices very similar to the ones EA has been using to run its business, and we are sure speaking out about it. We have slandered WB Games and their micro-gambling with Shadow of War. We called out Microsoft for the same in Forza 7. And we brought the pain to Bungie and Activision for mishandling Destiny 2. We are just fed up with the sensation that our games are being tinkered with, boxed off, taped off, and effed with to make them more about money than gaming. Video games are about having fun, and the expression of creating one should reflect that. Downloadable content pre-planned and pre-sold prior to the release of a game, artificial limitations placed inside games to steer them towards real money stores, or for money progression in single or multiplayer games. It's all crap, and it belongs in the toilet, or at the very least, in a free-to-play game. EA is but one company in a sea of many that are failing to see that this stuff is just killing full-price video games. How could they be blind to it, when in fact we actually care about what they're creating? I mean, can you honestly say you want Anthem to fail, or that you were hoping Battlefront 2 sucked? Of course not. We don't want video games to fail because we are the ones that get affected by it. EA can't see that it's in danger of being shunned in a bigger way than it already has been, and it's up to them to fix it. At the mature stage of their company, they stand at the crossroads where they will have to decide if EA gets back to glory or if it just goes down in flames. With a notorious propensity to keep getting caught with their hand in the cookie jar, or to get spotlit in another PR nightmare, or just to ruin the dreams of another game, EA stands to lose it all in 2018, I think anyway. Despite the success of both Madden and FIFA, I truly believe that EA just might not have enough to fall back on if Anthem sucks or if they continue their current position in the industry. The entire situation boils down to EA claiming that their games are just too expensive to make, and hence they need to fall back on service-based applications and microtransactions just to survive. I'm sure you may have heard this pop up in the news somewhere as justification to their recent behavior with Battlefront 2, but did you also hear that they then told their investors that removing said microtransactions would not affect their game's bottom line? A nice little catch-22. It's a bold-faced lie, and if that's not the shining example of why things need to change, I'm just not sure what is. Even though their numbers improved following the turn of the year, that is only the short term. The bigger story is about to happen, and that day is today. The video game industry boomed to a $116 billion industry by the turn of the year. At this rate, gaming is going to take over and overtake the sports industry within 4 years, which is valued at $150 million. So many new video game makers have come in, and so many new fans have come in demanding great stuff. With mid-priced, free, and mobile games swallowing the attention of AAA games at an increasingly progressive rate, there will just be no room for error in the years to come for AAA game makers. This is a list of 14 high-level EA executives that sold off a combined $6 million in EA stock in the last 60 days or so. Does this say something about their confidence that they hold in the company going into the new year? This may be the year that EA won't be able to continue operating in the way that they have been, and the year that they won't be able to push their for-money game models on us anymore, without making even worse headlines, losing more loyalty, and damaging their brand even further for the last time. We have seen that our voices truly matter though, and that our voices can be heard, that a unified message can make change. I believe gamers are unlikely to keep quiet again this year if EA continues to leave the wants and needs of gamers behind them. The level of scrutiny may rise to a point where it will affect their stock price again, even more than it did in November. At that time, it's unclear what's going to happen to the once highly regarded Electronic Arts.